Amidst a torrential downpour, Emily spotted an elephant standing resolutely in the middle of the path, its large eyes fixated on her. She couldn't believe what she was looking at. The elephant cautiously attempted to approach her, its gestures filled with a strange, almost desperate intention. Emily's eyes widened when she saw the huge elephant approaching her. Her first instinct was to run away, but something stopped her. She had never seen an elephant in real life before, and it was truly a fascinating sight. The animal didn't look aggressive or angry at all, so Emily decided to keep her distance, but she didn't immediately run. The two of them just stood there, completely still, and they simply stared at each other for a moment. Pretty quickly, though, the moment passed and the elephant took a step in Emily's direction. Her heart was beating in her chest like it was going to explode, but she stood still, not wanting to do anything that might scare the animal away. It seemed like it was asking her to follow it into the woods. Emily doubted whether or not she should do this, but only for a second. She already found herself between the green bushes and trees following the elephant. She had no idea where it was leading her, but it seemed to be urgent. The rain was still pouring down from the sky, and she almost slipped in the mud several times, and she had no idea where she was. She had never even been in this forest before, and she was completely disoriented. How was she ever going to get out of there? She shook her head, letting out an annoyed chuckle. What was I even thinking? Following an elephant into the woods? She finally stopped walking and turned around, ready to go home and hoping that she could find the way back. One thing became clear. The elephant did not want her to leave. It let out a loud trumpet that made Emily jump up in surprise, and when she turned back to face it, she was surprised by what she saw. The elephant had stopped walking as well, and it was looking at her. It moved its trunk back and forth, and it made a low, rumbling noise. Its signals were clear now, and Emily was sure that she wasn't just imagining things. This elephant was actually communicating with her. She was getting more and more curious to see where it was leading her. It was becoming more and more restless, and Emily felt like they were getting closer to their destination. And not much later, when it finally stopped raining, they arrived at a small clearing in the woods. At first, Emily didn't see anything unusual in this clearing. She thought that they just happened to be passing through it, or perhaps the elephant wanted to get some rest. And she tried not to think about the fact that she would probably never find her way back. She exclaimed, taken aback by the sudden surge of energy that it showed. It started trumpeting loudly, and it felt like the whole forest was shaking. But there was a good reason why the elephant was so upset. The elephant was now letting out soft wailing sounds, and Emily slowly and carefully approached it. Was it hurt? She was no elephant expert, but it had seemed perfectly healthy until then, and she hadn't spotted any wounds or bleeding. She could see that the elephant was really upset now, and that frightened her a little bit, so she kept her distance. But then she saw what was going on. The elephant moved, and Emily could finally see what it was crying about. In front of it, on the grassy ground, was a baby elephant. It lay on the ground, unmoving, and it seemed like there was something wrong with it. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming stories. With cautious steps, Emily approached the towering figure of the mother elephant, which, to her surprise, did not charge, but rather watched with an intense, almost pleading gaze as she neared the injured baby. Its large, soulful eyes seemed to understand her intentions, allowing her to come close despite the obvious danger, a silent plea for help etched in its stance. Emily's heart pounded as she kneeled beside the baby elephant, her hands trembling at the sight of the bullet wound oozing blood. The harsh reality hit her like a freight train, leaving her breathless and filled with a fierce determination to save this innocent creature. Emily's mind raced, realizing the gravity of the baby elephant's injury. It needed more than just first aid. It needed professional medical attention and fast. Emily pulled out her phone for help, only to be met with the crushing silence of no signal. Panic began to set in, the reality of their isolation dawning on her. They were alone, with time running out for the wounded baby. The baby elephant was a victim of poachers, targeted and left for dead. The urgency to save this innocent life burning fiercer within her. Time and again, Emily hit the call button. Each attempt to reach 911 met with frustrating failure. The mother elephant's eyes, deep pools of sorrow and understanding, watched Emily with an intensity that pierced her soul, silently pleading for her to succeed. Emily promised the mother elephant that she would return with help. Emily pushed through the dense underbrush. The life of the baby elephant hung precariously in the balance. The forest seemed to mock her efforts, its sprawling expanse a barrier between her and the help she desperately sought. Climbing a small, muddy hill, Emily hoped the slight elevation would be her salvation, her eyes fixed on her phone, praying for just a single bar of signal. Her breath caught as she willed it to connect, a tiny glimmer of hope in the vast, indifferent wilderness. Emily could see the mother elephant's anxious pacing, its large form moving with a restless energy that mirrored her own growing desperation. The sight spurred her on, renewing her determination to not let this majestic creature and her baby down. Before disappearing into the forest, Emily turned back to lock eyes with the mother elephant, her gaze firm and resolute, silently communicating her promise to return with help. Emily's resolve hardened as she pressed on, her determination to find a signal. Every step she took was fueled by the urgent need to save the baby elephant, her mission clear in her mind as she navigated the treacherous terrain. Her heart skipped a beat when her foot brushed against something metallic. A shotgun, abandoned and ominous, lay in her path. The realization that the poachers might still be close sent a shiver down her spine. Emily picked up the shotgun. It was a symbol of the threat surrounding them, but now it was in her hands, a tool she could use to protect the innocent lives depending on her. As Emily continued her search for a signal, the shotgun felt heavy in her hands, not just from its weight, but from the responsibility it symbolized. Emily moved forward with a renewed sense of urgency, the shotgun an unwanted but necessary companion. Each step was a mix of hope and fear, a balancing act between the desperate search for a signal and the ever-present threat of the poachers. Her breath caught as she stumbled upon a camp, the remnants of a fire still smoldering. It was crudely made, but bore the unmistakable signs of human occupation, likely the poachers. Emily couldn't resist the urge to search the camp for any useful clues or tools. In the eerie quiet of the poachers' camp, Emily's phone suddenly vibrated with life, a signal finally piercing through the forest canopy. Her heart leaped with hope, the sudden connection a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. With no time to waste, Emily quickly relayed the dire situation to the 911 operator, her words a rapid stream of urgency, describing the injured baby elephant and their location. She knew every second counted and her voice carried the weight of their survival. Once the call was made, she raced back to the clearing, her mind a whirlwind of worry and hope. Each step was a silent plea for the rescuers to be as quick as her beating heart. When she back. She watched over the baby elephant with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, her eyes darting to the path through which help would come. As the minutes dragged on, the baby elephant's breathing grew more labored, its condition visibly deteriorating. The tension in the air was thick, the weight of the waiting filled with silent prayers for a miracle. The mother elephant's deep, mournful sounds filled the clearing, a heartbreaking anthem of maternal anguish. She stayed close to her baby, her large body a protective fortress, yet her eyes betrayed a deep, unspoken fear and sorrow. The sound of hurried footsteps announced the arrival of a wildlife rescuer who, without a moment's hesitation, began administering urgent care to the baby elephant. Emily watched, a mix of relief and gratitude flooding through her as the professional's hands worked. With the situation still dire and no police in sight, the rescuer turned to Emily, his expression grave. He stated they couldn't wait any longer and asked her to lead him to the poachers' camp. With a deep breath, Emily led the way, her heart pounding with the gravity of the mission. They moved towards the camp, blending into the forest's natural camouflage. As they navigated through the underbrush, the poachers' camp drawing ever closer. Emily and the rescuer's eyes met the cold gaze of the poachers, realizing the peril had escalated. Emily and the rescuer's eyes met the cold gaze of the poachers, realizing the peril had escalated. With hearts racing, they retreated, dodging through trees and underbrush in a frantic bid to return to the clearing. They finally emerged back into the clearing, the familiar sight of the mother and baby elephant, a bittersweet relief. The once peaceful clearing tensed as the sound of approaching footsteps signaled the poachers' imminent arrival. She realized they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned, the poachers approaching figures casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to foretell a violent confrontation. The poachers finally emerged, their eyes cold and calculating. They brazenly demanded the rescuers hand over the baby elephant. Each second stretched into eternity as they weighed their limited options. the baby elephant's pained cries punctuating the heavy silence. Emily felt a paralyzing fear, her mind racing for a solution but finding none, the standoff reaching a fever pitch with no apparent way out. The poachers moved in closer, their circle tightening around Emily and the rescuers, the odds stacked against them in this desperate. Emily's voice broke the tense silence, her plea for mercy aimed at the poachers' seemingly indifferent hearts. Her words were filled with a raw desperation, a last-ditch effort to appeal to any shred of humanity they might possess. Just as despair seemed to consume the clearing, the faint sound of sirens pierced the tense atmosphere. Police cars burst into the clearing, their lights slicing through the gloom. Officers sprang into action, their arrival a dramatic turn of events. The tide turned swiftly as the police apprehended the poachers, handcuffs clicking in a satisfying rhythm of justice. The baby elephant was transported to a sanctuary, a place of healing and safety. Emily watched, her heart swelling with relief and hope as the young creature was given a second chance at a peaceful, protected life. In the sanctuary, the baby elephant's spirit began to mend alongside its physical wounds. Its playful antics and bright eyes spoke volumes of its resilience, a touching testament to its will to live and the care it received. The mother elephant reached out to Emily with her trunk, a gentle touch that spoke louder than words. As Emily watched the elephants in the sanctuary, a mix of relief, wonder, and profound respect filled her. It was the end of a harrowing chapter, but also the start of a new beginning.